Good afternoon, DMV. Welcome to another edition of the DMV Daily Radio Show. I'm your host, Hassan Giordano, a.k.a. Mr. Politics, back in the building. I know y'all missed me from yesterday, but my main man, Ivan Bates, was holding it down with two distinguished journalists as they talked about some serious conversations yesterday. If you missed it, make sure to go to DMVDaily.news. Catch it right now. Go to our YouTube page. Watch the video. Remember, it's 24/7 now. You can go to DMVDaily.news any time of the day, click the play button, and you'll be able to hear past shows that you may have missed. So make sure you go tune in there. Of course, we're streaming live from our new studios located down here in the historic Charles Village neighborhood. 2421 Maryland Avenue is the address. And of course, we're live streaming exclusively to DMVDaily.news, as well as to our social media pages, Facebook, Periscope, YouTube. Go check us out on the video stream at DMV Daily News. And remember, always 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can always catch the audio podcast and the radio shows right here being premiered on DMVDaily.news. Now, I know you're used to the DMV Daily Show at our new time now, 5 to 6:30 p.m., but we got a lot of programs lined up for you by the start of the new year. We're going to have people from all across the city, all across the DMV coming right here. You'll be able to check them out during their times and their days. People who want to act like divas sometimes. You know, I ain't going to talk about nobody too good to come on the program right now, but we may have people like, I don't know, former Mayor Sheila Dixon, guy named Donnie Glover from over West Baltimore, Be More News, Christina Flowers. We got a whole list of individuals that you'll see on the DMV Daily Network. So make sure you tune in just for that. Joining me, as usual, is my right-hand man, Maryland's legal eagle, and the show's trusted legal advisor, none other than my main man, Ivan Bates, Esquire. What's happening, Captain?
Hey, glad to be here, Hassan. How was everybody doing out there in the DMV?
And we also joined, of course, by my partner, the show's producer and the studio engineer, the man who makes all of this live streaming happen. Of course, my main man, Jason Rodriguez, holding us down.
Good afternoon, family. Just want to remind everyone we're now streaming live on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, and on DMVDaily.news. So you can go out there and check us out right now.
Also joining us, he ain't here today. Mark McLaren is in D.C. on assignment, holding it down for the union. So he will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow we got a power pack program lined up for you that you don't want to miss, that Mark will be hosting tomorrow's program. So you definitely don't want to stay tuned for that one. This station, of course, and its programs are owned, operated, and produced by the DMV Daily Media Group, Maryland's premier communications firm specializing in radio, television, and online podcast productions. Get your message heard each and every day right here on DMVDaily.news by bringing your own show on the DMV Daily Podcast Network or by advertising on our broadcast network. If you want your business or your message heard by thousands of people on multiple streams such as iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, Alexa, Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, Google Play, and DMVDaily.news each and every day, or you want us to record and produce your own program to be heard right here on DMV Daily News, that's all you need to do is email us, info@dmvdaily.news, call us, 443-294-3900, or just go online to the website, dmvdaily.news, fill out the forms provided for you to host your own radio show or television program. If you want to be able to just get your podcast produced, do that as well. Just go there. Or if you want to be a citizen journalist and write for DMV Daily, definitely go there, fill out the form. One of our team members will get back to you within 24 hours, and we will make that happen. Remember, this program is brought to you by our wonderful sponsors, such as Politicom Strategic Solutions, successfully helping candidates get elected since the 1970s. Politicom has mastered the art of political communications and become Maryland's premier campaign consulting firm. If you are looking to get elected to office in 2020, make sure you contact them today. 240-242-7505 is the number. It's also brought to you by that stellar legal team, known none other as the Bates & Garcia Law Firm, specializing in criminal defense, real estate, and bodily injury cases. Bates & Garcia is Maryland's legal dream team, so contact them today for your free consultation, 410-814-4600. 4600. And last but certainly not least, the show is brought to you by the powerhouse union known as SEIU 500, who want you to know that Together We Rise is not just a slogan, but rather a blueprint for the future of the union movement. Visit them today at www.seiu500.org. And if you want to join on today's conversation, make sure you call in or text your question or comment to the studio phone lines. 410-819-2370 is the number. And if you're watching us on Facebook Live at DMV Daily News, post your question or comment right there on the timeline. You know we're always interacting with you on that Facebook chat, and we'll make sure that we address it, especially today. Today, the phone lines and the topics are open. We're going to talk about a few things, but we really want to hear from you. We want to talk about some issues that you want to talk about, that you want to hear right here on DMV Daily. Now, I definitely want to let you know that yesterday's program was a power-packed program. After you listen to today's show, I know you're tuned in. Right afterwards, go to DMV Daily, go up to the top, listen to the radio stream, or go to our somewhere on the site. You can find it from yesterday's program that Ivan was hosting. We had two wonderful journalists. What were y'all talking about yesterday, Ivan?
We talked about basically the gun trace task force, what was really going on, some of the history of the police corruption in Baltimore City. And Justine Barron was here, and she talked about Sean Suiter and whether it was a murder, suicide. And she broke down the video footage in a way that very few people ever have, to give a totally different view of what I view as the murder of Sean Suiter. And it was very interesting. We learned a lot. There was a lot of material, a lot of information that you're just not getting out there, that's just not getting out from traditional journalists.
Yeah, her and Baynard Woods, they did a wonderful job. And you know, I was caught up. I was catching bits and pieces of it during it, but afterwards last night, I checked it out, and it was definitely a wonderful conversation. People need to go. It was a very educational and informational program.
And we got to thank our callers too for calling in and sharing their stories. We also had Keith Davis' wife called in and gave us an update as to what's going on with Keith Davis. So we appreciate that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm trying to convince her and Tawanda, Tyrone West's sister, Tawanda Jones, to do a program podcast on the network together. I think that those two sisters combined to do a weekly podcast on the criminal justice system and what we see today would be, forget Serial. Now, all respect to Serial and Undisputed, but trust and believe those two sisters together will be a powerhouse program. So I'm still in the mix of trying to convince those two sisters to do that program. But Michael Cohen, you gone? All right, man. You bluffing, man. Come up on the airways, man.
We had our very own Donnie Glover as our studio audience.
Hey, man. You know, roll out on us, man. So we want to talk about a few things. Michael Cohen, the man President Trump refers to as a rat for cooperating with the feds in this Mueller probe, was sentenced to 3 years yesterday in prison after pleading guilty to crimes that included making false statements to Congress, tax evasion, and of course arranging payments during the 2016 election to silence women who claimed that they had an affair with Trump, which of course the president denies. Was that enough? I mean, first of all, Ivan, you're the legal counsel. The guy snitched. I mean, he basically turned evidence. He pleaded guilty in order for a lenient sentence, but still got 3 years. I mean, did he make out, in your opinion, as a legal counsel? Would you have advised him to rat and then turn and get 3 years?
You know, I think he was in a lot of trouble. I don't think people understand just how deep he was in. You had from the finance issues, the election law. You had just the ethical issues. He's losing his law license. I think, from my understanding, that he had so many different issues that kind of consolidated everything into one to give him his 3-year sentence. I think whether or not you decide to cooperate is a decision that each and every person has to make individually. And for him, I think he felt, okay, this is going to be my best shot to try to weather the storm. I think the judge saw that, and with the judge seeing that they sentenced him. 3 years is a substantial amount of time, but on the federal side, he'll probably go to a boot camp. And so it's not the traditional sense in terms of incarceration that we see, so, down in central booking or jail when it was open, or division of correction. A boot camp is a little more open, may not even be any walls. And, you sit down and look at it, what is he going to really do? 75% of that, and then he'll probably, get released to a halfway house. No one ever wants to be away from their family, but it could have been a lot worse for him.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are hoping it'll be a lot worse for Donald Trump in the near future. Whether that comes to fruition or not, the bigger question is, we always think, and this is the scary part under this administration, when somebody gets convicted of crimes that are close to the Trump administration, you're wondering if they'll do any time because he may just go ahead and pardon them. Like, he just seems like, oh, I'm just going to pardon whoever the hell I feel like pardoning.
Yeah.
Whereas, though, I don't think that's going to apply to Michael Cohen, because now he's on the bad side of Trump for kind of switching. I don't know if I would have just took my lumps and hoped that Trump would have pardoned me by staying close to him instead of turning state evidence on him or federal evidence on him and becoming an informant against him. Now you have no chance in the world of getting a pardon.
Well, I mean, look, I think one of the things you have to do is you want to sit down and show contrition that you're actually sorry about being involved and come as humble as possible. And that's what you always want to make sure that your clients do when they plead guilty. And, I think for him, he was hoping that the cooperation would lead to no jail.
Right.
And it led to 3 years, so he has to deal with it.
Well, Jason, we love your comment, but we've gotten a lot more comments that say the program is even better without Mark. So maybe he'll be on an extended vacation since you want to use aliases around here. Another thing we want to talk about is a group of officers that filed a lawsuit in federal court against the Prince George's County, alleging that the police department discriminates against Black and Hispanic employees and retaliates against those who report racist and inappropriate conduct involving white officers. Now, this just came to fruition in the past 24 hours or so. I think the ACLU of Maryland is a part of the legal side of things. There's about 13 different officers, both current and former, African Americans and Hispanics, who have brought this suit. From a legal perspective, right? I know public perception is we can all believe that racism exists, especially in a department like Prince George's County. Now, mind you, it's an African American dominated jurisdiction like Baltimore, but there's a white police commander there, right? Okay. Superintendent. Kind of like there was here in Baltimore City, and it seems to be, we can believe that. But the question is, how do you prove that in court, and what if anything will change because of this lawsuit?
Well, I think Baltimore had some similar issues back in the day when they went to the federal court. And one of the things from my understanding of this case is that they have emails. They have, the testimony from witnesses of how they were treated when they made complaints, how they were treated, how they retaliated against. So it's like any other type of retaliation case. They'd put together information. They'd have to hear from, like I said, the emails. I think the email is going to be huge because it's going to sit down and see where the police commissioner was. My understanding, even with the police commissioner, he had apologized or said he was going to change something and never did that. And I think, he's probably already acknowledged some of the issues they had. He hasn't fixed any of those problems, hasn't fixed any of those issues. And then now it looks like they're going to be able to go ahead and have a right to sue.
That's going to be an interesting one, especially now we have a new Prince George's County exec, my girl Angela also Brooks. And she had made a statement that she was used to working with the police commissioner, or they don't call it the commissioner there. But for all intents and purposes, the police commissioner or those in charge of the police department as the former state's attorney for Prince George's County. But now she's working as the county exec, and it's a whole different role. And she's hoping the relationship will remain the same. But one would question, does she hope that there's going to be a new police commissioner. And I'm almost certain, and if I'm wrong, please somebody let me know, she's responsible for appointing that police commander. So how long will he last will be a whole nother question. And what are the optics of her possibly letting him go during a lawsuit being pending? Like, is there any legal ramifications to that? Could he possibly come back and say, well, you can't do that because I'm currently, is it kind of like retaliation, or does she have the prerogative and the right to do that?
Well, I mean, you'd have to really look at this contract. You know, if she has an opportunity to release him for anything, then she can. And then you're saying, was it retaliation, or was it a situation in which, looking at the evidence, she definitely had some issues and concerns, may not have been enough for a verdict? You know, it may be. But I think whatever decision she makes, she'll make sure that she watches herself, she watches her back, make sure, most of all, she watches out for the citizens of Prince George's County and any other retaliatory lawsuits may come about. I think when you look at the entire situation, does he still have the support of the officers? Because if you don't have the support of the officers, then you can't do your job appropriately. I think those are some of the things that we've seen in Baltimore the last few years. Because when the officers lose the feeling that they can support and want to follow the leadership of the police commissioner or the person in charge, then you just see that they're not going to do their job the same way. And so I think she has a number of reasons, a number of ways, if she wishes to get rid of him, that she can sit down and be able to articulate in a manner that it protects her in Prince George's County.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, and I'm going to keep saying it over and over until y'all finally get the picture. The first African-American and first female governor of the great state of Maryland will be Angela Alsobrooks. Watch what I'm telling you. Don't listen to Mark. He don't know what he's talking about. He just don't like the woman. But I'm telling you, that's going to be it. If not in 4 years, which I think that'll be in the next 4 years, definitely within the next 8 to 12. So you heard it right here first. DMV Daily, Mr. Politics told you that. Now, Congress passed an $867 billion farm bill, which rejected the president and the Republicans' push to further put limits on the food stamp recipients, as well as legalizing hemp. Now, SNAP, of course, you know, it's the program. It's better known as the food stamp program, but SNAP is the supplemental nutrition program that goes through Congress. The House Republicans' farm bill would have 4 states. This is the Republican initiative that they try to put in, to impose work requirements for food stamp for people working between the ages of 49 to 59 would have required you to work, as well as parents with children ages 6 to 12, which analysts say would have cut benefits to more than 1 million Americans. Fortunately enough, we had enough political will in both the House and the Senate to ensure that that was not included. And now this farm bill also legalizes the production of hemp, which, of course, as you know, is a form of cannabis with lower THC levels, of course, than marijuana, which analysts say could grow into $20 billion industry by 2022. That is going to be huge. And the funny thing is that our Comcast installer for the business came in, and he deals in this hemp business. And he does medical marijuana. He takes it, he's prescribed because of some ailments and injuries. And he travels all around the country and gets good money. And if you look at places like California, Colorado, and other places, they even have 24-hour radio broadcasts like we have strictly about marijuana. Like, it's a very big industry all across the country. It's not that big over here on the East Coast yet. But if Maryland can be the first state to legalize marijuana, we could possibly see that push. We saw, the legislators go with the legalization based off the medical use of it. Yeah. But I think legislators, if they know better, I know Frank Conway and I had a conversation about this years ago, we know it's coming. You can kind of see the writing on the wall. We saw it with gambling. Like, they had National Harbor set up to have that casino put in before they even passed the 2007 legislation to enact gaming here in Maryland. So you kind of know when things like that are going to happen. But it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where that goes. And then we definitely want to talk about, and again, family, call in. Today's show is all about what you want to talk about. I'm just throwing out some topics. We'll go back and forth and talk about them, but we want to hear from you. You can put us on a Facebook feed. We can talk about it. Call us 410-819-2370 or even text the number 410-819-2370. We'll be able to see it. You can call in. We'll put you through, and we can talk about what you want to talk about, or we could talk about some of the subjects that we're bringing up today. Speaking of the casino, which I think is the next plan for Pimlico, if it stays or even if it goes, the new Maryland Stadium Authority study just came out today.
Yes.
Calls for demolishing Pimlico Racecourse altogether and rebuilding it at a cost of $424 million. Well, I'm still trying to figure out where that money's going to go, which would include $252 million for a multi-use clubhouse, $120 million for infrastructure improvements, almost $30 million in work for the infield and track, and $21.5 million for demolition, and calls for building a grocery store and townhouses, a hotel, and other shops in the surrounding area. Now, my question is it worth it? I mean, it's one thing to build up a horse track because you want Pimlico to stay the Preakness. But what the hell are you going to do with the rest of the community? I mean, you go anywhere around the parameters of Pimlico. I used to live right there on that block of Belvedere and Park Heights, 3300 block. It's terrible. Like your man Kahan said, it's a third world country. That's what he said the other day. Had Mark off the check. But it's ridiculous. So when are we going to start building up the communities around? Because I'm going to tell you something. Kevin Plank would not have invested that much money down there in South Baltimore on the waterfront had those communities look like Park Heights.
Yeah, because of Harbor East, Harbor West.
Yeah. There's no way he would have.
And if you remember, this bill or this proposed $400 million actually was a topic of discussion at the Baltimore legislative meeting.
Not the Black
delegation.
Caucus.
The delegation, the Baltimore City delegation, if you remember. And someone actually kind of caused a scene to where Delegate Glenn had to tell them to talk to the hand on their way out, being escorted out by security. Which
is a legislator telling you to talk to the hand. That is
which you can find that on DMVDaily.news, by the way. You can see the live video of that, by the way. So, but it's definitely a conversation of controversy because folks are thinking that $400 million could be spent elsewhere.
Well, one of the questions I have, okay, how are we going to build up these communities unless we go in there with something that's going to be an anchor? And then from there, like they're going to build and they're going to put out townhouses. They're going to have a grocery store. Those are two things that are very, very important. You got to have a grocery store. You want to make sure you have places for people to live. And so then from there, is that going to possibly be the anchor to change that community? I mean, for so long, if you sit down and look at what happened down the Inner Harbor, they had to anchor in terms of a grocery store. Whole Foods. Then you sit down and look at the townhouses and the apartments and the condos. So is that what they're going to use to be the anchor to revitalize that neighborhood? I mean, those are the questions I would like to sit down and see answered. What's the future look like, not just in 5 years, 20 years from now? And if that's really going to be the change agent for that neighborhood, I'm all for it. Now, I also want to find out where this money is going to come from because, if they legalize the marijuana, then maybe some of the money's there. Now, one of the things that's interesting, remember when Ben Jealous was running, he talked about the legalization of marijuana, paying for a number of the programs, things like that. So my question is, okay, now we're going to legalize hemp. What's going to happen? We're going to tax it. Whether the radio's going to tax it. What's going to happen with it? I mean, there's so many questions that we can sit down and ask in terms of where that money is going to come from, how are we going to get that money. Baltimore has a myriad of problems, a myriad of issues, but we really have to invest in the infrastructure of our city to make some of the changes and real changes. Because when you have the townhouses, new families will hopefully be moving in the area. When you have the grocery store, then you have not just some of the newer families, some of the older families, some of the more established families that have been in the area, but also is this an opportunity then to say, you know what, you have to put together a new school in that location? Is that something we can sit down and talk about to allow the children in that neighborhood to have a new school building?
But the question is this. So the anchors seem to be the hospitals now, right?
Yes.
You got Johns Hopkins, right, over East Baltimore. Got the University of Maryland over more central West Baltimore. And now Northwest Baltimore, it seems to be more anchored around Sinai. Sinai actually owns part of that property over there,
Yes.
part of the, adjacent to Pimlico, right? And so now the question is, are we pricing out those around that? Now, it's one thing to have an anchor, but it's a whole nother thing to totally move out all those who grew up there, who may have been there all their lives, right? Who push them out, and then by the time it's time to move back in these new townhouses, how much is it going to cost to actually live there? And will the people be able to afford to move back in, or will they? And even the store. I mean, Whole Foods. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Most black people can't afford Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Living paycheck to paycheck. You know, they got to go to Giant, Shoppers, and even Giant. They say is expensive. I love Giant, but they say that's
Safeway.
expensive, right? Well, do they even have Safeway anymore? I can't stand it.
Then they got one up on
yeah.
right around the corner
Yeah, on Liberty.
in Charles
Yeah.
Street.
Oh, right here. That's right.
Right
they got
around the
one
corner.
right there. Yeah.
I heard
Yeah, I
the
ain't
original
never been.
one of the original master plans for that area was to make it a retirement community, to be able to have seniors to be able to go to the racetrack, to be able to gamble, eventually pushing legalized gambling.
Well, I think the
or
gambling is
slots.
going to be big as
Right.
well.
Oh, they're gonna move gambling. in
Yeah,
there.
and I think when they do that, if you have a senior's home, senior living, senior establishment, I mean that changes things. But you're right. I would want to see who's going to be the partner. Whether it's going to be someone like Giant, whether it's going to be Safeway, one of those types of chains. In terms of being a partner, in terms of the grocery store, there's a lot that needs to be hammered out here. But I do like the simple fact that we're at least looking at it from a different perspective. And if we can't agree, then that's fine. But at least we're thinking about what to do with the land instead of just selling it to, a big time developer and letting them do whatever they want to. But here is a plan, and how we're going to carry out this plan to me is important.
But is this plan the start of gentrification in Park Heights? Because again, that's what you see in a lot of these neighborhoods, especially with these big institutions. You said Sinai is one of the institutions in that area. We know on the west side, Maryland University, on the east side, Johns Hopkins. There seems to be a lot of redevelopment planning going on, but it's gentrified.
No, look, I definitely agree. I think we have to know a lot more about the plan. One of the things that's very interesting, I remember talking to some developers, Baltimore City, I want to look at the city council. I could be wrong with this, but I think there are a number of other cities that say, okay, if a developer is going to do a certain amount of, they're going to develop this building. And within this development of this building, X percent needs to be for a certain low income, families, a certain income. I mean, those are the types of things I would like to see the city council sit down and look in terms of, okay, you have the control, you have the opportunity to do what you want in terms of making sure that you can keep and have the opportunity for people to live in those neighborhoods to be able to stay and afford to be in there. I was at a community meeting the other night, and they had these two sisters presenting from the Baltimore City Trust Fund and Housing Trust Fund. It was so interesting what they had to say, making sure we have affordable housing. How do we continue to have affordable housing? I think we need to bring the people at the table to sit down and talk with not just the developers, but individuals who want to have affordable housing. How do we make sure this happens? How do we make sure we keep that going? And how do we make sure that we don't price individuals out and we can keep the culture that's already in those neighborhoods still there?
Ivan Bates, 2020. You hear it right
No.
here. but we've heard these plans before. EDBI is a perfect example. There were some, not necessarily guarantees, but there was supposed to be some mixed-use affordable housing added to that plan. And unfortunately, when you go back and you look at exactly how much was actually kind of allocated for affordable housing, it's less than a couple of percents. It wasn't the original. I think it was like 13%, 14% they were looking at originally having as far as mixed use was concerned. But the developer went ahead and nobody was really there to hold them accountable to say, yeah, well, you have to fill this quota
Well, that's the problem. Typically, it's
Yeah.
around 20%, right, that they have these mandates.
Yeah.
But the problem is, it's how it's written and the language and who's going to hold them accountable. A lot of times, even with these TIFs and the pilots that they give to these developers with this long-term, okay, we're not going to charge you now, but in the long term, we're going to benefit. But if you write that off later on, who's there really as the watchdog to make sure that 10 years down the line, they're paying that bill? Or, for instance, some of them are being given slots, community association buildings, schools for $1, and they got contracts for like 200 years. And it's ridiculous. I mean, one thing, and speaking of schools, Friendship Academy, I got to say this.
Yeah.
This is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. It's right across the street from my son's school. Mm-hmm. And they're having they are so bad up at that school. They got armed guards up there, 2 or 3 of them every day. They had 6 fights the other day. Kid got stabbed yesterday or the day before, right? These kids are fighting the kids coming from my son's school right down the street, that they can go right down there, and that's right where the bus stop, right on Northern Parkway. And it's just getting out of control. And at what point do we hold our city leaders accountable for schools like this? I mean, there were kids that I had to literally go pick my son up, and I had to give a ride to a few because young ladies up there are like, I don't even want to be in that school anymore. It terrifies me to be in this, in Friendship Academy, because of what goes on in the culture of that school. And they say it's a transit school, that they're, putting them there for whatever reason to another school. There's something wrong with schools like that, that there's a very huge problem when you have to have officers like that up there on a regular basis, fights like that on a regular basis, kids cussing out people, all that type of stuff. I mean, they were cussing out teachers. I went up there. It was ridiculous. I mean, these kids were talking to teachers, but the flip point of that, the teachers were talking to kids like they were grown people, cussing them out and everything. And it's like,
wow.
At what point do you show leadership? Like, who does that?
Yeah, we could have a whole show and then some based on the dysfunction of the school system, unfortunately, in Baltimore City. Once again, the leadership. I think Jason asked the question: when do we hold our leaders accountable? That's really on us, the citizens, because the leaders are only going to do as much as you will allow them to do. For instance, if you have a problem, then you and your group need to sit down and make as much noise about the issue as possible. Make sure your issue is front and forward and center. And if you do that, you're visiting your city council member, you're letting them know your issues, you're reaching out, you're writing your letters, you're writing your emails, you're sitting out there letting your voices be heard. Eventually someone will pay attention. And the person who pay attention may not be the political leader. It may be the other citizens who will join you in voting out that political leader. Now, that is the way, and that's the beauty of democracy. If we have the opportunity to make a change, you must be a part of the process to make the change. So not voting is not part of the process. Voting, being engaged, letting your voices be heard. That's one of the things I must admit I really do appreciate and like in terms of the progressive movement. If we sit down and look at so many of the movements around our country, there were people who weren't for them at the very beginning. The power structure doesn't want to give up the power. Once the movement began to gain traction, once the movement began to gain speed, that's when the elected officials all of a sudden said, oh, you know what, this is good. I want to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. Why? Maybe they didn't really believe in it, but they recognized if they wanted to continue being an elected official, they'd have to bend to the will of the people. And when people speak, then electeds make a change.
And that's what happened with body cameras on police officers. I remember when we wrote the bill. I wrote it for him. Frank Conway Jr. had the bill in Annapolis back in 2013, 2012. Man, those people laughed him out of Annapolis when he brought that bill. Body cameras on police. Oh, that would never work. That. Soon as that whole national movement happened with all these African Americans being killed by police, it became a pseudo, we need this type of thing. Now everybody jumps on board. They stole his bill and put the leadership's name on it and got the bill passed. I mean, that's the games they play up in Annapolis. But they want to make Frank Conway look like a fool when he was the one who had this from the giddy up. And
Okay.
you know that's it's the crazy part. You got to build momentum. I understand that, but sometimes you just got to have the wherewithal and the foresight to say we're going to do this first, and if it makes sense, then let's lead. Let's be the leaders on this. Many times in Maryland, we seem to be the ones who want to wait till others do it, even in Baltimore, and see if it works first before we implement it, instead of being that change agent to say, you know what, this makes sense for the people. We're going to go ahead and do it. Whether it works or it fails, at least you tried to make that difference. And oftentimes you just don't find that here in the state of Maryland, the city of Baltimore. That's the fight we had with voting rights for former felons. For years, it was, oh, no, we can't do that. How dare we give back voting rights, you know. And even though it was slowly changing across the country, it took for more progressive-minded legislators to finally get it through committee, get to the floor, and finally get passed the way we wanted it to be passed in 2007. So, and I also want to talk about today, we got all this on the table. Sunday, our Ravens, Lamar Jackson has been named the starter, and Joe Flacco's healthy. So he's the backup. So we went back and forth on this the other day on social media. I, for one, I like Lamar. I'm not a great big fan of Joe Flacco, but in the same sense is he did take us to the Super Bowl. Those days are over with. I understand. But the boy can throw a lot better than Lamar, but he can't run for nothing. He stays in the pocket, and he seems like he doesn't have any passion. So the question is, do you start Joe or do you start Lamar? And Lamar kind of showed his vulnerabilities this past 2 weeks with not really taking care of the ball sometimes. Definitely is not the greatest thrower in the world, but he leads that offense.
He just scares me when he runs.
Does. And then he doesn't take care of.
I look at he's going to get popped. They're looking to take his
just
head
like
off.
his backup, RG3.
Right. Or you look at what happened to the Redskins. I mean, they lost.
When they lost RG, two quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hear you. I do. But I do believe the future of the Ravens is Lamar Jackson.
The future, not the present.
Yeah, but the problem that we have right now is he won 3 games in a row. He had us in the game in Kansas City. A number of passes hit receivers in their hands. They dropped the ball. He can't throw it in. You may not like his throwing motion, and some of his mechanics aren't the greatest, but he brings excitement. He brings action. He gives us the opportunity to win and to be involved in the football game. The NFL has changed greatly. The NFL has gone from a league of ground and pound and great defense to everybody slinging the ball around here and there. And so guess what? Now when you have a slow 'em up offense, you know, like the Ravens, and they take their time to get down the field, slow and methodical like it used to be, and then they, you know, score a touchdown. Now this other offense that needs to get in a rhythm, they've been sitting on the sidelines, and now the Ravens defense is the energy, and they're out there just going. And so it's almost as if you're wearing the other side's defense out with your offense, and your defense is able to sit down on the sidelines. Remember, the Ravens have the #1 scoring defense. I thought the Ravens defense played a phenomenal game against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, did they?
They kept us in the game. Exactly.
They've been off the check,
Look at
especially
you knowing
Atlanta.
them stats. Look at
Yeah.
you.
Oh, he's a fantasy sports guy.
Eagle over here.
Yo,
Yeah.
you can't. Sports, oh, dude, I could just do a whole show on sports alone.
He's a fantasy sport.
Yeah.
I used to think I could take him to town, but then I realized he had to let me know he was a fantasy sports
Oh,
guy.
yeah,
So,
dude, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm big on that. And so, you know, but look, Lamar's got to learn. The best time to learn, look, the chance of us winning the Super Bowl this year, they're not happening. And that's just what it is.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Got a live feed going on.
Yeah, I don't know if it depends on who we face, right? In
Well,
the
it does.
playoffs.
But
And
we-
it depends on how it goes. But with Lamar in, I don't know why, but with Lamar in, the running game is fucking off the chains.
It is.
When Joe's in, we can't rush for 50 yards.
Because they know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, Joe, I mean, it's just a different level of excitement. They have to key on Lamar. I just think that the only time to learn how to deal with the pressures to deal with those growing pains now. And at first I was like, well, no, let's give him an entire red shirt year like Kansas City did with Mahomes. But, you know, he's there. Let's sit down and let him learn. Let's sit down. I guarantee you, from the growth that he had at Louisville, and I watched him, and I remember watching him when he was a freshman coming out, and the way he looked, and you're like, God, that dude's terrible. But he's exciting. He works so hard to get better, and in many ways, that's Baltimore. You're going to work hard, and you may get knocked down, but you're going to get right back up, and that's what I like about that young man.
Well, here's the question, though. Here's the question that I have for you. I don't mind. Okay, we start him at Tampa Bay, right? That's coming up this Sunday. And we overcome Tampa Bay. We still got San Diego and Cleveland. Yeah. San Diego on the road. That's going to be a tough game, right?
It is.
But San Diego puts up some points.
They do.
So do you kind of start Lamar there, or Cleveland, start Lamar? But you get to the playoffs and say we go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who would you rather have as your quarterback? Joe Flacco, who's battle-tested and knows those type of Steeler type of games, or a rookie like Lamar Jackson, who, especially in the 2-minute drill, does not look good. I mean, they treat him like a kid. They take a timeout every time during a 2-minute drill because he doesn't understand that offense is well enough to be able to go out there and do what we got to do to get down the field.
Well, I'm in the playoffs. I'll deal with it at that moment in time. I still think that just because Flacco's sitting there on the bench, I still think that Flacco will get playing time. I wouldn't be shocked to see him, especially win against Tampa. I wouldn't be shocked to see him do something against San Diego, because now you have two totally different types of offensive on one team. And now how do defenses scheme, to decide how to deal with that?
That's a good point.
And I think that's something that you develop that puts you in a different position. The NFL is totally, truly a team sport. The quarterback, is one of the most important positions, but then you can have somebody that changes and elevates everybody's play to another level. I think that Flacco still has an opportunity to come in there. I think he may come in there and you down by 21 points. Boom, he sits down, throws a couple bombs. Defense in San Diego isn't ready for that, and we're making moves, and all of a sudden we've won the game.
But and it was so funny because even with Lamar come in, they bring in the other running back. What's his name?
Edwards.
Edwards, right? And Gus Edwards comes in as a backup. But in that type of motion offense, he thrives and he gets 100 plus yards 2 games straight. But whereas though the running back, the starting running back, who ain't no chump either because he carried us all last year, he's now been put on the back burner right along with Flacco. And so he's battling for time.
Well, I think he's on the IR now.
Well, he had a little ankle injury, but he was still on the back. And then you got the other boy that they brought in off of waivers trade, the running back, Ty Montgomery. Yes. And he comes out of the backfield. We got enough players, wide receivers, running backs, on that offensive line to really do some damage in the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if we could make it to the Super Bowl based off of just depending, again,
but that's
how we go up against who.
That's the $100,000 question. Do we make it to the playoffs?
Yeah, I think we're half a game behind Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh got to face the Patriots this week.
And
I got the Patriots winning.
And they have to play the Saints still.
Exactly.
My wife still doesn't understand that half a game thing. I tried to explain it to her a few times.
Because they had a tie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can't stand that tie crap.
Right.
Let them play. Until somebody wins.
Like
this
college
is the
football.
This is the pros. You're going to give them 10 minutes and they you're done. The tie. Man, get the hell out of here. Play it's already the National Ferry League with all these damn penalties they keep putting on them people, man. Every time they hit them, it's a damn
set up
penalty. All right.
We got Lisa Mills. Lisa Mills on the line. Lisa.
I know Lisa ain't calling about no Ravens. She calling about the casino. Lisa. And Lisa just hung up on us.
She just hung up.
Yeah, good shit. Kelly Fox says, without a proficient offensive line, we need mobility to have the best chance to win. That being said, Lamar Jackson is not better than Flacco yet.
Oh, no, he's not better than Flacco yet. But remember, he's a young, hungry, exciting quarterback who cost about $20 million less than Joe Flacco.
Yeah, Flacco got to go at the end of this year.
I mean,
that
contract. So imagine with that $20 million extra dollars, what you can do to build your offensive line out, who you can pay. So say you want to have a superstar stud running back, then you can give Le'Veon Bell a contract if that's something you want to. Or you can go ahead and invest on your own free agents to allow your team. If you sit down and look at all the teams that are out there, except for New England basically decided we're going to pay Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's going to take less money, but we have a great system. But then you sit down and look at the Steelers. The Steelers, their window is closing, I feel. And then, you sit down and look at St. Louis. You sit down and look at the Chiefs. Those are the two. And you sit down and look at the Bears. Looking at those teams right there, they have a cost-efficient, a cost-effective quarterback, and they've built their team out. The Rams especially, the things that they've been able to do to pay the people, and now paying everybody big bucks now, knowing that they're going to eventually have to pay their quarterback. I just think in the NFL nowadays, you need to. It's truly a team sport. So, I mean, he's not as good as Flacco now.
Right.
But he's not $20 million worse.
No. And honestly, after this year, Flacco got to go. And to answer your question, Kelly, yes. If we don't make the playoffs, Harbaugh is gone. Get up out of here. You got to go. Now, I ain't going to lie. I like Harbaugh. And I think he's been a great coach. And I don't think it's his fault that we haven't made the playoffs.
No. Yeah. I don't think, you know what,
but you got to go.
I don't feel that way. I really don't. I personally feel that Harbaugh needs a good year with Lamar Jackson. And I like the way that he's put him in a position. I like the way he's back with defense. I like the moves that he's made. I honestly, personally feel that this is one of his best years in terms of coaching. Because the train could have gone off the track earlier on when when Flacco was hurt, not playing well. My other problem is the quarterback to me needs to be the leader of the team, needs to be the fire in the team. And unfortunately for me, that's just not Flacco. So that's had to be Harbaugh. And eventually people don't want to hear Harbaugh. They want the quarterback to be the leader. I do believe Jackson would do that. I just think that I like the direction the team's going. And I like Harbaugh in that regard.
Yeah, Harbaugh, I like him as the coach. A couple years ago, he had an issue with the locker room. That's why he got rid of a lot of the louder, blacker players that were on his team. We want to be honest about it. He couldn't control them. And without Ray in the locker room to help reel him in, he had to get rid of, what's his name, Bernard Pollard, back safety.
Yeah,
people like that. But I think now he has a good control of that offense and defense of the team in general. I like Don Wink. But I don't think we need Harbaugh. Here's the thing. I don't mind having him, but if we don't make the playoffs, I think it's going to be hard pressed for ownership to keep Harbaugh because we haven't made the playoffs for so many years.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Because I'm going to tell you something. I was one of those fans freezing my ass off at the Cincinnati game last year, the last game of the season. Me and my man, it was less than 0 degrees out there. And we had the chance to go to the playoffs all the way at the end, ended up losing it the last game, the play of this game, and ended up letting what bum team got in there because we didn't get in. I forgot who it was. That hasn't been there in a while. Detroit or somebody like that.
The Bills?
Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
I was mad. I wanted Harbaugh gone in. I just freeze my ass off for 3.5 hours for y'all to get. Come on, man. But I think this year it's a different system. They got different coordinators, different players.
The defense
they drafted
well
as well.
The defense is playing well. They drafted well. It takes a little bit of time for it to gel. I think, I like the direction team's going. I think if you stop it now with Harbaugh, what else could happen? You could have a whole new head coach wants to bring a whole new defensive coordinator in. I just think the parts of the team are playing very well. And if you're able to get into the playoffs with basically a rookie coming in the midway part of the season, is a phenomenal coaching job.
No, yeah, I think if he makes it to the playoffs, even if we lose the first game, as long as he makes it to the playoffs, I think he keeps his job.
Well, look. If we beat Tampa Bay, we lose to San Diego, and we beat Cleveland but don't get into the playoffs, to me that's still a win because we were right there at the door.
We were right there at the door last year. There ain't no. The only thing closeness is in horseshoes.
No, I understand.
We ain't playing all that.
We had the turnover with the team.
It doesn't.
He's
the
turned
defense
over
is
the
established.
team.
Ain't nothing turned over about that.
All right, look.
We got brand new receivers. Joe Flacco's been there. I mean, come on, man. We had to. If we lose, if we don't go to the playoffs, it's Harbaugh's fault for keeping Flacco in there as long as he did. Because when Flacco was in there, he went, 3 for 4? And he was, the last 3 games, he was choking.
But the problem is, Jackson just wasn't ready. He just wasn't ready. It takes time. It takes time to go from college to the pros. The speed of the game. It's just,
he's not ready now, but he stepped up.
You know what? But
and
they've
he's the
been
starting quarterback.
But they've pared enough of the playbook down so that he's comfortable. They've put him in positions to be comfortable. That's why I say next year you're going to see a different quarterback. That's just my personal feeling. Watching that kid at Louisville, and the other thing that makes him to me a little more unique. Remember Barry Sanders? You always felt like Barry Sanders was about to get pummeled when he ran. But for some reason, he was just shifty enough at the end. They never got a great hit on him. That's what I get when I see Lamar Jackson out there. He's out there. Where RG3, always felt like he had a little more athletic ability than the other person. Where I feel that Lamar Jackson saw, no, you're not going to give it. Yeah, you got to. And you just miss him by a little bit. That's how I kind of look at it.
I'm just surprised at your sports analysis here. Like, you got family. You got to tune in every Thursday to Ivan Bates Sports Hour. Like,
well, I just want to ask. I'm going to really test his regiment right now to see if he even stays on the show
Lisa
right
Mills,
now.
Hold on, we know you on there. Hold on 1 second.
This determines whether you even stay in this building anymore. Who's your college team?
Oh, I'm a Florida State fan.
Oh, Lord, hell, get off the air.
I'm Florida State. Let me tell you.
Roll Tide, roll. Get off the air, man.
Boy.
Okay.
Hey, I've been Florida State since Bobby Bowden. I was the kid that used to dream that Bobby Bowden was going to knock on my door and offer me a football scholarship. That was just me. But I'm Florida State. I love Florida State. What can I say?
Roll Tide, roll.
We could talk about, Loxley now the head coach of the University of Maryland. That's a good move.
Huge.
That's huge.
And then the boy from University of Maryland, he's down there with Alabama.
And you look at what Nick Saban's doing. So
Lisa Mills.
Lisa, you down there? And you at the Horseshoe?
Hey.
No, I'm not at the Horseshoe. Now, hold on a minute because I got a lot to say. Lamar, look, the Ravens saved a lot on his salary because they only had to pay him a little bit of money. I mean, a little less, not a little bit because he's still getting millions, but a little less. But I look at Lamar as young and inexperienced. He's an accident, in my opinion, waiting to happen because he takes a lot of chances. Now, if he had the right coach, say if it was Ray Lewis or somebody standing behind him, guiding him, he may be okay. But if he doesn't get that structure behind him, he's just an injury waiting to happen.
But that's what I thought.
The other thing that I really wanted to talk about.
RG3 was there for.
Say that again.
I said that's what I thought RG3 was there for.
That's why he's there.
Stuff happens. I mean, look at Lamar. You never really know which way he's gonna go about it, or what he's gonna do because he's young. But that's a whole nother thing. I'm gonna leave the football things to you guys. What I really wanted to talk about was this buyback program. I just think there's just a lot of waste of money. And did you check out the neighborhoods that they want to buy the guns back? They want to buy the guns back off of Pennsylvania Avenue, Montford Avenue, Monument Street. Do you really think the thugs and people down there are going to sell their guns back to the city? No. I mean, I just think that that's a waste of time.
Well, they always do it. When they do it, they sell out the guns that don't work, the old dusty guns.
Well, that's what usually happens,
in
Lisa. You usually get grandma that doesn't want the gun in the house anymore. The auntie that inherited the gun somehow that was left in the house doesn't want it anymore. They don't
or a gun, or a gun that's connected to a murder that they want to get rid of.
Grandma, look, that's the part I think is crazy. Because grandma living in the hood now. Grandma ought to be wise enough to know that if anybody needs a daggone gun, grandma needs the gun. Because us as older people, we become victims. And then finally, Jason, don't tell Ivan, but I still got that banner that say Ivan Bates. So 2020, we waiting on it.
Right. That's right.
And Ivan, you did a good job yesterday on that
Lisa,
show,
me
man.
and you
I'm
could-
sorry I had to leave because I wanted to call in and run my mouth so bad, but I had a family emergency.
Lisa,
and
me
you know
and you-
what? I said that was it, but it's not. One other thing. You know, Ivan brings the sound of reason and logic to the show. Hassan, you just a damn instigator. You be instigating the show like crazy. And Mark the comedian. Mark is just the one that's just going to be hard-headed and ain't going to give a damn about nothing. But I love you guys. I just love what you're doing. Good luck, everybody.
Lisa, me and you can head up Ivan's street team. So I'm ready to beat the streets with you. All right.
I got the banner. I got that big foot-long banner say Ivan Bates. They don't know it, but I got a couple of T-shirts. I still got it.
Well, thank you.
All right, love you guys. Happy holidays.
All right, you
Yeah,
too.
happy
You
holiday.
too.
Wow.
Instigate. What you mean that?
The instigator. But let's talk about the
You
guy.
gotta have a
gun
little
buyback.
agitation in the wash,
Yeah,
don't you?
that gun buyback. Leadership. Come on now. The show that Randy Mossman do. Come on. Was it Come On Now?
Yeah.
Where they sit down and things just happen and they can't believe it. Now, we're about to be, 299, 297 in terms of homicides.
295 was yesterday.
Yesterday.
Then a woman got killed today in the middle of the day.
296.
So about 6, 7.
Yeah.
Four away.
Yeah, we're
About
four
four
away.
away.
And the best we can do is a gun buyback program. I mean, it's funny because I'll never forget the first time I ever heard about a gun buyback program. Defense attorney, I'm in court, and my client gets caught with a gun in the car. And you know what they told me the defense should be? They were going to take the gun to the gun buyback program. You laugh.
Did you use that?
I sure did, and the jury found him not guilty.
That's some shit.
Yeah. And they don't think about the other side of that because now, if I get called for gun in the streets, I'm saying I'm taking the gun to the gun buyback program because that's something they didn't think about as well, how they're going to transport these guns. These seem like a halfway decent idea, not to me. But now the money you're going to use, the gun buyback program and all that, why don't we just use it for better police training to allow the police to do their job so they can, stop the people if they're doing something and probable cause and they're, reasonable articulable suspicion. They pat them down, they see the gun, they see the bulge. Why don't we go ahead and invest money in that? Or why don't we sit down and really work to make sure we have the right individual being the police commissioner to allow them to do that job?
And speaking of that, the news media asked Mayor Pugh, how much money do we have for the gun buyback program? Oh, we got enough. Like, how's that an answer? We got enough.
Well, yeah.
You're already spending $9 million a week in public safety. A week. When they just did this annual report. Do you know how much money that is?
Yeah.
We always spend 40 to 50% of the annual budget on public safety.
Yeah.
Where schools
And now the budget's hitting
barely
what?
get to 15%.
$2 billion plus now.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, but what do we actually do? I mean, because I had this argument with the old police commissioner, Frederick Bielfeld, who actually said at one time that recreation centers was superficial, that he didn't think that it was something that was something that could resolve crime or help crime. He actually wasn't in support of recreation centers. Some folks are not in support of the gun buyback. I mean, what is the key answer that may help? I mean,
Well, I don't think community centers do resolve crime. I think it gets our children something to do, right? Instead of being out on the corner. I mean, this is Baltimore. You don't have too much to do. Children want to be active. So if they have a household where there's no real parent structure,
Yeah.
if they're not going to be able to go to the rec center and play basketball or be on a computer or whatever, then they're going to be out on the streets, which causes God knows what's going to happen to them. Or, of course, you get caught up in the drugs and the gangs. But honestly, a person who's breaking the law isn't going to stop breaking the law because the rec center's there, right? So, but that doesn't mean that you eliminate it because it's not, community centers were never built to be a deterrent to crime. They were built as an activity for young people and the community to have a place to go to do certain activities.
So what?
And
what
so
would be
Bill
a
Shell should have
solution?
never did. That
Right.
was the problem. You should
Well,
have never
because
lumped
we were
together
pushing
the
for
two.
funding for, at the time, the talk on Most Talk Radio in the urban community was trying to push for more funding, and we were looking at closing up recreational centers at the time. So, and he blasted the community by saying that, recreational centers was superficial, that it wasn't something that was going to resolve the crime issue. And so, but what is that answer? Like, one of my suggestions and solutions was to really bring back the social workers and have the social workers to be able to work. I think we have 14 policing districts, and have them work within the districts and to be able to kind of evaluate and identify neighborhoods that really need wraparound services or need additional resources. And then Stephanie Ryland Blake, the former mayor, Stephanie Ryland Blake, blasted me and said that we didn't have enough money in the budget to be able to support social workers in 14 districts. But
I do believe that rec centers are very important because they give the children a place to go. You also have the opportunity to keep them off the street, out of trouble, but also jobs are very important. There's not one magic thing that you can do. It's a number of different things. For instance, one, you have to give the kids something else to do. Number two, you have to give job training and jobs. And number three, when they mess up in their criminal justice system, you need to sit down and hold them accountable. And whether that means they're on probation or whether that means a very stiff, hard jail sentence to get their attention. Because that jail sentence isn't only for the person that committed the crime. The jail sentence should be a deterrent for other children that are on the cusp. Like, well, you know what? I can go rob somebody and I'm good. Or, you know what? I can go ahead and go get the job and not worry about that
But
issue.
some of these kids don't care about that. I give you a perfect example. There's gentlemen that I've heard of that because they live so harsh an environment in their home, that jail is actually a better choice. Or going to the juvenile facility that, from what I understand, has a PlayStation 4, and it's state of the art as
They don't
far
have any
as
hope.
new juveniles.
They don't have any hope,
Right.
and so that's where you sit down and have a rec center that gives them hope, that lets them see a different life, that gives them the opportunity to interact with different people. When children and people in the community have lost hope, they're only worried about themselves because that's just who we are. If I don't have any hope, I got to take care of myself.
Right.
So you know what? I'm hungry. No one out here cares about me being hungry. So you know what? I have a gun, so I got to get what I need to get. So they're going to go ahead and get it the way that they need to get it. I mean, that's just
Like
how
we saw with
society
Jacqueline-
is.
See, to
Jacqueline
me,
Smith, like we
the
saw.
problem exists is I think you really need wraparound services integrated in the school system
Yeah.
that attach that to the kids or to the younger generation to understand. You'll be able to see in these schools what kids
Correct.
don't have parent supervision.
Correct.
You can tell by that. Those city services, whether it's social service or whatever, integrated in them to be able to say, at that point, how do we get into the home to fix the system before this person becomes a statistic?
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But you also got to get those involved on the streets directly to be able to get to them. Right? You to say that we need this kumbaya fix-it service by community centers and all that, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You don't know who's going to... Just because you build it don't mean they're going to come. But you can go to the corners of Park Heights and Belvedere and see the individuals out there and then be able to target them to come and say, what is your family environment like? Now, how can we fix and address this, whether it's employment, whatever the case may be? And if they're not, like you said, if they're not willing to conform through by giving them employment or giving them different services, then maybe jail is in a stiffer sentence. Maybe because, look, at the end of the day, some people are just going to break crime. That's just who they're just going to break the law. That's just who it is. And at the end of the day, you can't be lenient on those individuals. But in the same sense, there's a lot of people, and if you go into jails, at least 80 to 90% of them are there because of drug and substance abuse problems. Yeah. That's a whole different subject, especially with Baltimore, because they took all the money that used to be in Baltimore for substance abuse. Now, because of the opioid, now it's an opioid crisis, right? It sent all that to the white community suburbs to make sure they get their proper treatment services, and pretty much completely alienated Baltimore. now because we don't look like the proper person that needs that type of service.
Well, you know, let's look at something they announced yesterday. And to me, this is totally crazy. And I want the citizens to recognize what happened. The federal government has decided to look at every single fentanyl case in Baltimore City, and only Baltimore City. And the state's attorney sat down and said, yeah, we don't want those. It's the state's attorney's job to prosecute fentanyl cases. And so when we sit down and look at that, now all those cases will go to the federal side, which means a kid on the corner could be sitting out there selling drugs. He's not mixing it up. He or she is selling drugs.
Right.
However, the batch may have fentanyl in it.
Correct.
Someone dies from the fentanyl batch. This kid who's 18, 19, who doesn't have anything, is now on the federal side facing a murder charge because the state's attorney's office in Baltimore City doesn't want to prosecute fentanyl cases. So what it is going to do to these kids in our city. So one of the things to me that rec centers are important is it gives the kids a place to go, but it also allows the kids who are straddling on the fence to have the positive role models.
Right.
Because you have the kids,
have the coaches.
to have the coaches, to have the positive individuals. A lot of these kids are just looking for someone to follow, to be a part of. Sometimes these kids join a gang not because they want to be a gang member, but just because they wanted to be part of a family.
Exactly. And they don't have a family at home, so that was the next best thing to give them love and money and, you know, an ability to call somebody, you know, their family until they get caught up in the game.
Yeah.
Then they realize, man, this ain't what I thought it was going to be. But
So we haven't started this yet, but we have Lisa Mills. So we haven't started this one caller rule yet, but Lisa,
Hey,
you
I'm back
wanted to follow
again.
back up?
You know,
Hey.
you were talking about the schools, and I got to tell you, when it comes to the children being disciplinary students in school, I would love to see the schools take on a school/work incentive program or school/trade. Like they'll go to school for maybe 2 or 3 hours and get an education, and then for the rest of the day they're working directly on a trade, whether it's bricklaying, home improvement, you know, something like that, to give the child something that's substantial that they can hold on to, like I'm really training for a career, like I'm really training for a job. I think that
or did they eliminate
once you
There has been some vocational schools
like Mervo used to do it.
Right.
with
but
But
I
it's
think
not
they
like it
need
was
to
before.
incorporate it into the school system so that the children can you know, they'll have a reason to get up off the streets.
And Lisa,
and finally,
Lisa, my argument has always been, never mind the labor as vocational. We have some fine institutions here like Johns Hopkins and we have Maryland University Medical Center. You know, why aren't they working on trying to incorporate STEM and get some of these folks into being chemists, to being doctors?
and I agree. I totally agree. And that's my point
researchers.
exactly. Put them in when they reach the age of 15 and 16 years old. Start training them directly for a career.
Yeah.
While they're in school, start training them directly for a career. I think that would be a positive movement. And I would love to see somebody pass a law so that when we elect certain officials in the office and we find out that they're not being as transparent as they say they are, you know, everybody talk about transparency. You get in the office and they're not as transparent as they promise to be. Why can't we get them out faster? I mean, we can get them in, but we can't get them out.
That's how it be. It's easy to get in. It's easier to get in than it is to get them out.
But that's always been one of my arguments. Again, we have some of these fine institutions. Why aren't they stepping up to help train? You know, to me, we have our future cure for cancer is right within our community. You know, the future person that can cure most of the diseases that we deal with, diabetes, high blood pressure, things of that nature, may be right within our community. But we don't nurture our community enough to make them the doctors and the researchers and the scientists that they need to be. You know, so in some cases, I feel that these cures for these particular ailments go unaddressed because we don't have folks within our community that are going out there and are working within these, these particular trades.
Well, to me, economic employment is always the biggest thing, right? People don't sell, and I hate when people talk about selling drugs. We didn't sell drugs because we wanted to,
Right.
because it was a fashionable thing to do. You typically sold it because you needed money. And you saw that as a fast and easy way to get money, and lots of it. And we came up in an era where that was the sexy thing to do, right? You got the cars, you got the women behind it, the money, right? But it was all economic based. I think most people would have left and went on to a different way of life had that financial structure been there. And to me, I think we're missing a point is though when we got young people who are actively involved in something that they like to do or love to do, it would make them more susceptible to doing the right thing. You took a young man out of the prison system, made him an employee at staff at your law firm, right?
Yeah.
He is less likely now to have to go out there and break the law because he's getting paid to do something that he was on the other side of the law, but now he finds joy and a passion into finding and breaking down law. I was solid at your office when he breaking down case law as good as the lawyers.
Right. Is he looking at pursuing law or even being a paralegal?
He is a paralegal. He's my paralegal right now.
I know that's right.
Young brother Corey. And he has a phenomenal story. And I always like to tell a story. And, was sentenced to 50 years in the feds back in the 90s. Was in Park Heights. And then I think he said about 7 or 8 years in he realized he needed to change everything. And so every day for about 13, 14 years, he spent every day in the law library. And he was able to understand how to write, how to give the proper analysis. And then he changed his life and did such an amazing job that the federal judge that gave him the 50 years let him out after 23 years. And so for me, people always say, wow, they want to pat me on the back because I gave him a chance. He's done more for me as an employer than I think I could have done for him. Because what he's shown me is that when individuals come home, they need to have the opportunity of a job, but they also need to have the opportunity of a family-like environment to constantly support them, to let them know that, hey, we're not judging on your past, we're judging on your future. And we're going to give you a future because we're looking to see who you are right now.
And that's what we have to have more. The city, the state government needs to look at it from a sense of not even just returning citizens, but young people, right? Yeah. Kids who get involved, like for instance now, my son, 12 years old, my 3-year-old knows how to go through my phone like a 12-year-old. Yeah. I mean, because they learn from a very early age how to operate these devices, right? Because that's all they know. So to get a young person starting in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and be able to get them involved in small businesses around the city, to me makes sense, okay? A person like DMV Daily, we would love to have some young people, teach them how to code, teach them how to do the technology here, to be backup, production managers and stuff like that. The city can then give them a stipend, and they don't want much. My son will clean an entire house and run for 3 days just for $10, right? So you pay them $100 a month, they cool because they don't really need much. You get them at a young age engaged in something like a law firm or Be More News or DMV Daily, these small businesses, these mom and pop businesses that can't really afford all these employees, right? You get these young people involved that they can be interns, and they start now developing that mindset of working and of being involved in a job and of possibly starting their own, right? And by the time they get to high school and college, you don't have to now try to turn them around. The hardest thing to do is to turn somebody around who already has a mindset that's ingrained that this is my way of life. It's almost, I think it's not impossible, but it's damn near impossible. Until that person wants to change, they're not going to.
And that type of investment is less money than spending half of your budget on public safety,
Exactly. That's a preventative measure, and it's easier to do, and it helps the small businesses. It helps the young people. And, I mean, it's a win-win, but it's like we don't have elected officials, and I'm not going to just blame it on them, but that's a big part of it. Because they make the policies that would help shape this. But we also need small business owners and the population as a whole to be able to grasp something like that. And like you said earlier in the show, to push that down the throats that the politicians have no other choice but to be able to support something like that.
Yeah.
We'd like to salute, what's the gentleman's name again?
Oh, Corey.
Corey. We'd like to salute Corey here on DMV Daily.
All right. Well, it's about time for us to roll. Tomorrow, what we got on tap tomorrow?
You actually got about 10 minutes, so.
No, it's 6:27.
6:27.
Yeah, but I like to start on time and end on time. That's it's just me.
Tomorrow we have a very special show. A lot has been said recently about judging other individuals because they're different. Whether it's you're judging the LGBT community because, quote unquote, you believe they're different, or the diversity that we need to have in the community. So I'm really excited because tomorrow we will have a couple of amazing guests. And I know I'm extremely biased because my wife, Dr. Lana Bates, will be here tomorrow. And she does diversity work. She's going to talk about diversity and what the importance of diversity. But we also have a young man named Shane Bryan, who I have had the opportunity to meet. We had a show, one of our last shows on WOLB, and there were some comments, and some of the callers said some things that struck me as rather homophobic, and it did cause me some concern. And I felt that, we need to sit down and educate the community. People can have their thoughts and their beliefs. However, we need to sit down and educate the community because at the end of the day, we need everybody. And that'll
actually,
be an amazing opportunity.
That conversation came out of the fact that the mayor just recently supported a executive order, correct?
Right.
Where she signed
that was what the program was about.
Yes.
Right.
And that was what the
explain
program.
a little bit more because there's some folks that may not have heard that episode.
Well, the mayor recently signed an executive order that to receive minority business, you could be a member of the LGBT community. And there were a couple callers that said some things, and they were what I would view as homophobic. That's not what DMV Daily does at all. Anyway, it doesn't sanction that view at all. However, I do think it's important to sit down and talk about that issue, homophobia, so we can sit down and really deal with that. I think it's important to sit down and talk about diversity, talk about the beauty of different cultures, talk about the beauty of people, and the beauty that makes Baltimore what it is. So we're going to have that program. I'm not going to be on the guest. I'm not one of the guests. However,
I'm not going to be on it either. I'm going to tell you, we're going to let Mark host it. I'm going to sit in the audience because I've been accused of being someone who isn't as sensitive as I should be, whether it comes to homophobia or whether it comes to me writing about Maya Rocky Moore Cummins and calling her beautiful and being, what do they call me? Misogynistic, right? So I want to learn because Dr. Lana Bates is the person I learn from the most. So I want to hear this program instead of running my mouth and being the host of the program. And I think Mark would do a great job hosting it. And I can't wait to hear it and be a part of it, tell you the truth.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the program because I think one of the things that people have, some of the ignorance that we have out there, sometimes it's just, education. And, look, I do recognize I'm extremely biased when it comes to Dr. Lana Bates. That's why I feel that we only need to have one Bates on the program tomorrow. And but the work that she does and understand diversity and what diversity really looks like, it's not just black and white, but diversity within our community, our thoughts, and also having had the conversation with Shane. This is a young man who's moved and how he grew up and his thought process and just who he is and the battles that he's had to wage just to be seen as an individual has been really pretty amazing. And to have Mark, who is, not just a very astute politically, but he's a very, very smart, intelligent individual who's very, very sensitive to the needs of other people. And that's one of the things I think makes him so good as a political director for SEIU, because he does care about people. I think to bring all three together tomorrow will be a pretty amazing show.
Yeah. So make sure you tune in regular time 5 to 6:30 p.m. right here on DMVDaily.news. Remember, new promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow is greater than that of yesterday.
Free Keith Davis.